Somewhere in your kitchen right now, there might be an egg sitting in a carton. You've cracked thousands of them in your life. You've never once stopped to ask where the very first one came from. But the real answer is far stranger than you think, because the question isn't really about chickens. And it isn't really about eggs either. It's about time. It's about how far back you have to go before the question itself stops making sense. Ready? If you've ever argued about this with a friend at 2 a.m., drop a comment below and tell me which side you are on. Chicken first or egg first? Boom, you're about to find out who was right. Your ancestors asked this same question thousands of years ago, not casually. Seriously, ancient Greek thinkers debated it as a real philosophical puzzle. Aristotle wrote about it directly. He believed that both the bird and the egg must have always existed, one endlessly producing the other, stretching backward forever with no true beginning. To him, an infinite loop was easier to accept than a single starting point. Centuries later, the Greek writer Plutarch picked up the same question and turned it into a dinner party debate. He wasn't joking around. He treated it as a genuine test of logic, one that could reveal how the ancient mind understood cause and effect. Notice something here. These weren't uneducated people guessing randomly. They were among the sharpest thinkers of their time, and they still couldn't crack it. So why did it stump them for over 2,000 years? Because they were missing one piece of information. They didn't know that species change over time. They didn't know that a chicken as you know it today hasn't always existed. To them, a chicken was a chicken was a chicken forever. Back to the beginning of the world. That assumption is where the whole puzzle breaks. Think about how strange that is for a moment. An entire civilization, famous for logic and reasoning, got stuck on a question because of one missing fact. Not a lack of intelligence, a lack of information. It's a good reminder that being smart and having the right data are two completely different things. Here's the part that changes everything. Eggs existed long before chickens did, not slightly before, hundreds of millions of years before. Reptiles were laying hard-shelled eggs over 300 million years ago. Dinosaurs laid eggs by the millions for well over 150 million years. Early birds, the ancestors of everything that flies today, laid eggs too. All of this happened long before anything resembling a modern chicken ever walked the earth. Picture a Tyrannosaurus nest. Picture a velociraptor guarding a clutch of eggs in the dirt. That image alone should tell you everything you need to know. The egg isn't a chicken invention. The egg is one of the oldest survival strategies life ever came up with. A hard shell, a private world inside it, food and protection built right into the design. Nature figured that out long before feathers, long before beaks, long before anything clucked. So if eggs came first by such a massive margin, why does the question even feel hard? Because you're not really asking egg or chicken. You're asking something narrower without realizing it. You're asking which came first, a chicken or a chicken egg. And that's a completely different question with a completely different answer. Think about how a new species actually forms. It doesn't happen in one single leap. A creature doesn't wake up one morning as something entirely new. Change happens gradually, generation by generation, tiny genetic shift after tiny genetic shift, until enough differences build up that scientists draw a line and say, this one counts as something new. Somewhere along that slow chain, two birds that were almost chickens but not quite mated, and their genetic material combined in a slightly new way. The result was an egg. Inside that egg was an embryo, carrying the first true genetic blueprint of what scientists would later classify as a chicken. That egg hatched, and out walked the first chicken, which means the egg came first, not by tradition, not by opinion, by biology. Pause for a second. Does that land differently than you expected? There's real science that backs this up in a strange and specific way. In 2010, researchers at the University of Sheffield and the University of Warwick, led by scientist Colin Freeman, studied a protein involved in eggshell formation. That protein is called ovocleitin 17. It's produced in a chicken's ovaries, and it plays a critical role in speeding up the hardening of the shell. Without a chicken to produce that specific protein, the shell can't form the way it does, which means, mechanically speaking, you need a chicken present to make a true chicken egg. But that doesn't undo the earlier answer. It just tells you which chicken egg came first. And that egg still needed to be laid by a bird that was almost, but not fully, a chicken yet. So the egg wins on the biggest scale. And the mechanics of the shell still confirm a chicken had to be involved somewhere in the process. Both things are true at once. That's not a contradiction. That's evolution actually, working the way it works. Slowly, messily, one generation blurring into the next. If your brain just did a small double take, that's normal. Type, "Wait, what?" in the comments if you had to reread that last part twice. You're not alone. Now here's where it connects to something much bigger than birds. Ancient humans didn't have access to genetics. They didn't have fossil records mapped out. They didn't know evolution was even a real, ongoing process. So when they looked at a chicken and an egg, they saw two fixed, unchanging things. Two permanent categories with no visible path between them. Of course, the question felt impossible. They were missing the one fact that makes the whole thing solvable. Nothing stays the same forever. Not chickens, not you. Modern research has also traced the actual, real-world origin of the chicken as a domesticated animal. A major genetics study published in 2020, led by researcher Joe and colleagues working alongside domestication expert Gregor Larson at Oxford, examined DNA from red jungle fowl, the wild bird that chickens descended from. The evidence points to domestication happening in what is now Southeast Asia and southern China, likely connected to early rice farming communities roughly 3,500 years ago. Farmers weren't trying to create a new species. They were simply keeping birds close, feeding them scraps, letting the tamest and most useful ones breed again and again. Over generations, without anyone planning it, a wild jungle bird slowly became the chicken, sitting in your memory of a farm, or a backyard, or a grocery store shelf. That's the part that should really sit with you. Nobody invented the chicken on purpose. Nobody woke up one day and declared, "Today, a new species exists." It happened slowly, invisibly, through thousands of small choices made by people who had no idea they were witnessing evolution in real time. Think about what those early farmers were actually doing day to day. They weren't scientists. They weren't trying to prove a theory. They just noticed that some birds were calmer around people, easier to feed, less likely to fly off into the trees. So those were the birds that stayed close to the village. Those were the birds that got fed first, protected first, allowed to breed again and again. Every single choice was small. Keep this one, not that one. Repeated across hundreds of villages, across hundreds of generations, across more than 1,000 years. And somewhere inside all of that repetition, a wild jungle bird turned into a farmyard animal, without a single person ever deciding it on purpose. That's worth sitting with for a second. Some of the biggest changes in history were never announced. Nobody held a ceremony. There was no single day anyone could point to and say, "This is when it happened." It just happened quietly, underneath everyone's attention. The same way most real change still happens today. Kind of makes you wonder what's changing around you right now that you're too close to notice, doesn't it? Here's the twist most people never think about. You do the exact same thing ancient humans did, just with different questions. You look at fixed categories in your own life. Job or passion, which comes first? Confidence or success, which one has to happen before the other? Trust or connection, in a friendship or a relationship, which one has to be built first before the other can even start? You treat all of these like the chicken and the egg, two separate solid things, waiting for someone to prove which one started it all. But almost always, the real answer is that they built each other slowly, back and forth, in small steps you never noticed happening. Confidence doesn't strictly come before success. A small success builds a small bit of confidence. That confidence enables a slightly bigger success. Around and around, just like the egg and the bird. Neither one ever really first. Both of them looping into each other across time. That's not just a nice metaphor. It's actually how most growth works, in nature and in your own life. Biologists call this kind of process gradualism. The idea that big changes almost never happen in one dramatic leap. They happen through thousands of tiny, boring, unnoticed steps that only look like a single moment of change once you zoom far enough out. The chicken feels like a sudden new thing, only because you're looking at the finish line. Nobody was there taking notes generation by generation, watching a jungle bird slowly become something new. Which means the next time you catch yourself asking, which one has to come first, pause for a second. You might be standing exactly where Aristotle stood, staring at two things that look separate, when really they've been shaping each other quietly the entire time. If that reframed anything for you, hit like right now. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who are stuck asking the wrong version of a question, just like you might have been 5 minutes ago. So let's bring it all the way back. The egg came first, by hundreds of millions of years, long before anything resembling a chicken existed. The chicken egg came right alongside the very first chicken, laid by a bird that was almost, but not quite, there yet. And the whole reason this question felt unanswerable for over 2,000 years wasn't because it was actually unsolvable. It was because your ancestors were missing one idea. Everything changes slowly, one generation at a time, including the questions you think have only one right answer. Comment below with one thing in your own life you've been treating like a fixed chicken or egg question, something you assumed had to have a single starting point. You might be closer to an answer than you think. Because somewhere in your kitchen right now there might be an egg sitting in a carton, and now you know something about it that most people never will. It didn't start with the chicken. It started long before that. It started with a question your ancestors couldn't answer, and an answer that was hiding in plain sight the entire time.